Also, it's a hard 45. So we're probably, all of this prep I've done with other questions.
When you first come to this land, you look but you not see.
Do you have it in you to make it epic? This should be interesting.
Now you got your eyes open for the first time.
Good morning, everybody. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land where we're meeting today, the language group of the Yugambeh people, and pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and also pay my respects to any First Nations, Aboriginal, Torres Strait Islander people here in the room today. I'm Danielle McCarthy, and I'm the Industry Development and Audience Development Manager at Screen New South Wales. And thank you for turning up so sprightly for the 9 a.m. session. I'd also love to thank Screen Producers of Australia for turning out yet another amazing conference and bringing us together here at Screen Forever. It's always such a great opportunity to come together, meet new people, expand your networks, listen to amazing sessions, and just sort of hear about how we can make the industry even better than it already is. We're really pleased to partner with Screen Forever yet again. We hope you get valuable insights from this session and everything else here at the conference. It's really just the beginning of day 2. And here at Screen New South Wales, we're here to support New South Wales filmmakers, help you tell stories, whether it's the big screen or whether it's something small. But, you know, this session is really focusing on global differences, which really piqued my interest when we were discussing what we wanted to present here at Screen Forever. I've worked a lot overseas as well, so I can't wait to really hear what all these fascinating speakers have. Without further ado, I would love to hand over to our moderator, Daniel, and thank you in advance for the session, and also the panel members, Julius, Samantha, and Schuyler, to bring their wonderful insights this morning, and good luck.
Cheers, we'll need it. So just to second what Danielle said, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we stand today, and I'd like to pay respects to the elders, both past and present, and I extend this respect to to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders in the room. Thank you. So, welcome to, I wish I'd known this before, Global Differences in Production. This session is proudly brought to you by Screen New South Wales. I'm Daniel Reisinger, and before I introduce my esteemed panellists, who truly need no introduction really, I thought I'd briefly set up why I wanted to do this panel and my qualifications to talk about it. My first show, Sideswiped, was made in the US with the likes of Emmy winner Jason Sudeikis, aka Ted Lasso. I've made TV and many commercials back here in Australia, including Drunk History Australia with the likes of Stephen Curry and Rhys Darby. And most recently, I just wrapped my first feature in the UK for Universal and Netflix, a dramedy called And Mrs. With the likes of BAFTA winner Aisling Bea, Emmy nominees Harriet Walter and Colin Hanks, and Oscar nominee Liz McGovern. And in fact, in a shameless plug, here is a teaser trailer for my movie.
Good.
It gets better.
What film am I? I'm a romantic comedy.
Right, I'm gonna get the prayers in. No, sit down. Ow!
He's American. She is a goddess. She entrances him by swigging gin from her handbag. She said she never wanted to get married, but...
Will you marry me?
Ah, yeah, why not? I love you, so what am I so afraid of? I'm afraid that I'm not sure of a love there is no cure for.
Oh, it's such a pity that you're sleeping because I'm wearing nothing but nipple tassels and a willingness to please. Nathan. Nathan?
The most likely cause would have been a paradoxical embolism.
Well, this is embarrassing. Couldn't I have died getting mauled by a bear?
Audrey's not here. Don't leave a message.
I know she's Nathan's sister, of course, but...
She's a nut.
Oh, they're right. Hey, where's Nathan?
You should have picked up your phone.
We are here today to celebrate the life of Nathan Petrzewski.
Is that Polish?
You say Polish, I think big hearts. Great sausages. Auschwitz.
Nathan really wanted to marry me. Why not get married?
Nathan is dead.
Yeah, Mum, I know that. Thanks for the heads up.
Don't let me down.
Oh, look, I can marry Nathan if the Lord Chief Justice approves.
So you can technically marry a dead guy. That is fucked up. I'm not judging.
Don't let me down.
It's time to woman the fuck up. Grab hold of your labia. Let's do this. Yeah. Oh my God.
The law is the law. My hands are tied.
I guess nobody ever really done me.
Nathan isn't here anymore. Marriage is about building a future.
That is the promise that I made. Am I crazy?
Can't answer that, Boo Bear. I'm dead.
The hashtag Corpse Bride campaign is dividing the nation.
Don't let me down.
It's how she needs to say goodbye.
I mean, it's very traditional,
Yes,
but I like it.
Yeah, and you are absolutely smoking in it. Your husband is going to die.
Yeah. There you go. In all good cinemas, mid-September, and some bad ones too. So in making that film and my shows, I came to realize that actually film production is really different in every country, and that every country has its unique quirks and peccadillos. So I thought I'd bring in people who are vastly more experienced and talented than me to discuss these and whether or not, as I believe, Aussie crews really are the best. So sorry to my esteemed colleagues from overseas. So without any further ado, would you mind introducing yourself?
Hey everyone, thanks for coming out so early. Big room of people here, it's really cool. My name's Julius, Avery, I'm a filmmaker.
I'm Samantha McGrady, I'm a line producer and production manager living on the Gold Coast.
And I'm Schuyler Weiss, I'm a producer, also living here on the Gold Coast.
I live on the Gold Coast too.
And I don't. Okay, so if I can kick things off, my show in the US was a sitcom. We had $11 million US. I thought I was going to make the Dr. Zhivago of sitcoms. I thought that was an insane amount of money. And in Australia, it truly would be. And to this day, I'm still quite disappointed with the look of the final show. Because I found, even though I was helping with the budget, that weird things were draining the budget. So 30% of our budget went towards transport and the famous Teamster union. And while obviously unions are incredibly important in having work-life balance and protecting workers, sometimes that can go a little bit too far. And sometimes you want a little bit more flexibility with things. So Schuyler, when you made The Get Down with a little-known director called Baz Luhrmann in New York City, you had a really interesting experience when you were trying to bring in diverse kids from underprivileged backgrounds and tried to give them a leg up. Is that right?
Yeah, I think, and just to reiterate, I think that organized labor is really, really important to protecting the interests in creating safe workplaces and happy crews, and not just limited to the movie business. I think unions are really important culturally. But to Daniel's point, sometimes in the United States, the degree to which film crews are unionized and the power of the film unions can have what I have to assume are unintended consequences. So on the Get Down, which was a show that Baz created about creative young people in the Bronx in the 1970s, instead of traditional EPK, Baz thought it might be interesting to engage with creative young people in the Bronx in the 20-teens and invite them to come and document the process from their unique perspective through their lens. I thought that was a really interesting idea. Netflix thought that was a great idea. We partnered with a place called the Ghetto Film School, which was a small institution in the South Bronx, unironically named because they were trying to provide pathways into the screen industry for local kids in the South Bronx. So show up with our little plucky little band of camera and sound team teenagers from the Bronx on a show about how the biggest force in late 20th century, 21st century music was created by teenagers in the Bronx, and we lasted about an hour before the union shut the whole thing down because we were robbing job opportunities from dues-paying union EPK camera and sound. And look, that's their mandate, so I get that. But I think they did it with sort of willful blindness to the fact that we were trying to encourage a new generation of potential dues-paying camera and sound technicians from diverse backgrounds and bringing them into what was a really unique film set. And so began an 18-month-long stoush that I personally undertook with the powers that be at IATSE. And by the time we had resolved it and they sort of saw our way of thinking and, with so many caveats and conditions and fees that we had to pay and surcharges on these fees, the show was in post and the whole point was moot. And, I think that was what they intended. That was the result they intended.
Fascinating. Yeah, I mean, and especially in an era where we're trying to give diversity a mandate, it's a tricky one. And so, Sammy, you've shot around the world, literally, on some of your shows. Maybe we can show quickly from one of your little indie movies, Jason Bourne, a little EPK on how tricky that can be.
What was the purpose of your visit, sir?
Business.
Go.
We always want the movies to feel like they're in the real world. You create this porn world and you want it to feel seamless. We shot in Tenerife in Spain, London, Berlin.
And then we're going to go to Washington, D.C., and then we're going to end up in Las Vegas. It's going to be a fun adventure.
We go a lot of different exotic places. I think that makes it more exciting to people because it brings realism.
There's a demonstration in front of the Greek Parliament building.
Action! This is a piece, our first sequence, which is set in Athens. Bourne meets Nikki in widespread disorder.
I got all the Black Ops files.
There's very few places that you can go to in Europe that have the right look and feel, and Tenerife ended up being the right fit for us.
Tenerife became like a studio, really. You know, they were the main unit and the second unit, plus the extras. So yeah, we invaded the city for a while.
We have 600 extras. They're organizing soldiers and policemen in riot gear, and then the rioters and pyrotechnics and fire. It's pretty remarkable.
They tracked you. We gotta move.
What if he's not coming for us? What if it's something else?
It really feels like a Bourne movie. That's the coolest thing, to come back and look at the shots.
He's seen things. He knows things.
We filmed Bourne arriving in Berlin at the brand new station. There's a whole set piece in Berlin. This is where Jason Bourne has to come back to get a vital clue. Then we went to an apartment which is really grungy. We filmed geography shots and the shots that make you feel like you're really there.
I need to talk.
We don't go to the typical tourist places. I mean, most people don't know where this is in London.
It's the real living, breathing London we're in.
We've got this sort of idea for this sort of middle London sequence that was an enclosed space surrounded by lots of high buildings. No one's really ever shot here. Everybody's been really welcoming as we've wandered around the plaza, shooting everywhere and disrupting everything.
Yay! So Sammy, as we've discussed, I mean, one of the things we do well in Australia is think quickly on our feet. You know, if there's rain or there's some obstacle, we can adapt quickly. Tell me about shooting in Huntington Gardens on Mank. What happened when it rained on that one?
Sure. So I was filming in Los Angeles on a David Fincher film, Mank, and the first assistant director and myself, I was the second assistant director. We were shooting in Huntington Gardens, and we were inside a restaurant, and it started raining. We hadn't thought of weather cover because we were inside, but the rain was too heavy and it was affecting sound. So the first called me and said, let's come up with a plan. Can you call these actors, see if they're available, and then we'll present that and we'll pivot downtown to the studio. So we did all the groundwork for that. And because he also wasn't from America, we thought we had this great idea. Right, we're going to present this idea. So we presented it to the producer, and unfortunately in LA you can't pivot in the middle of the day. You can't ask people to get in their personal vehicles because it's a liability issue and drive to another location. That has to be pre-agreed, or you have to put on a bus or something. So our great idea meant that I then spent the next hour going around to every crew member ticking, are you okay getting in your own car? If you don't want to get in your own car, we can provide you with a bus, then we'll get a Teamster to drive your car down. So I think my point was, here and also in England and pretty much everywhere I've shot, we've been able to just think on our feet quickly, pivot, move, and that's always been part of being an AD, is thinking on your feet. But it's not so straightforward in a unionized city, particularly LA. I think LA particularly is.
That's fascinating. And so Julius, you know, it's not just America. You've obviously, we've got a lot of Irish people here. Shout out to Ireland. You've shot in Northern and Southern Ireland, right?
Just Southern, actually.
Just Southern.
Yeah, on the Pope's Exodus with Russell Crowe, we went down to Dublin and shot that movie. And outside of Australia, it's probably the most passionate, most dedicated crew I've ever worked with. But you know, I found like there was pros and cons to shooting there. There certainly was the passion and the drive from the crew, which is great. But you know, there are certain things that we just weren't aware of. Like for instance, the DP and myself on the first would go, all right, we can get this day done if we bring in pre-rigging crews and so forth. And then we were just told that there just isn't the manpower to do pre-rigging calls, which has never been the case for me in any production. So that was an interesting thing. And we found that the gaffer was under a lot of stress because he was there at Sparrows, you know, where he would usually have a pre-rigging gaffer sort of start for him. He was there first up, so he had a lot of pressure on him, and we were moving quite quickly because, you know, I think like especially with Southern Island, at that time there was a lot of the crew were used to more of a TV schedule, and we are more, you know, with films it's more of a compressed schedule, and so. Yeah, I think like there was just a bit of a learning curve for everyone, and you know the traditionally, you know, crews there have been used to continuous days, and the line producer didn't want to do that, and we did 12-hour days, and so you know, but it wasn't. And we had some overtime baked in and so forth, but that wasn't, I don't think, communicated to the crew. So the crew, I felt like a little bit like they had been, yeah, like I guess lied to, and I sort of got caught in the middle of that, and so we worked it out. Like the great thing about the Irish people in general is they're very passionate, and they want to help, but they also like have a real sense of like, yeah, you know, they don't want to be walked on or whatever and so forth. And so I felt like we all, as long as you could give the crew enough sort of lead up to the overtime, say next week we're going here, we need an extra hour or whatever, they would be fine with it. But if you kind of like went on a day, oh, we need that hour, people have kids and people have lives, and they like, you know, they can't just all of a sudden, you know, organise a babysitter. It's just like that granular stuff that you don't think about. But, you know, I feel like once it just was like a bit of a learning curve. The other thing that the production designer, even though he was actually Irish. He had been working in the UK system for many years, like on the Harry Potter movies. And this was his first actual feature film as a production designer in Dublin, where he's from. And he didn't realise that, like, you know, when you've got sets and you need to do it in a compressed schedule, we had a lot of sets, usually you can get it done because you can do a 6-day overtime, all that. In Dublin, they just don't do it. It's just not how they work. And so, like, I was turning up to sets where, you know, literally they were finishing them and we were shooting. We got it done and it all happened, it all worked. But it's just if we, you know, had known that, we could have like maybe, you know, got the studio, which takes a while, not the filmmakers, to approve sets, to approve, like, we've got to back in, because because the Hollywood studios, they think, oh, we'll just throw money at the problem. and it's not about money. And in a way, I actually think that, it was, just a learning curve for everyone, and the movie turned out beautiful, and I was very, very happy with the end result.
Yeah, I mean, the OT issue is an interesting one, because I felt sometimes in America, crews were gunning for it.
Yeah.
They wanted the OT because they get paid double time. And then I found in London, which was absolutely mind-blowing in my first week, the scriptie had a watch on, and if we went 30 seconds over, so it was like 7 o'clock and 30 seconds. That was bam. That was an hour of OT right there. And I was like, guys, we finished at 7. So no one had communicated that to me, because I'm Australian, obviously, and you know, it's a real growth experience, you know, having to learn those peccadillos. And so, Julius, you know, it's interesting. Everyone has people who you create these incredibly tight relationships with. And obviously, with your kind of work, prosthetics is huge, right? So can you talk to us about taking some of your crew with you and the integration process?
Yeah, so on Overlord, I worked with my prosthetics team who are actually Spain/London based, and I partnered them up with a local guy who basically supplied all the, you know, the kind of Tristan would do some stuff in his workshop in Spain, but then all the application, all that stuff was a local team and run by a local guy, and so it was about just partnering up like people that I had worked with, A, and B, just had you know, a level of experience and just sort of like figuring out who where the departments were lacking and where they excelled. So like for instance, like in Dublin, in Southern Ireland, the camera crews are just amazing. Like they're just next level. And so I, you know, had no interest in bringing in an A operator, you know, because they had such great depth and the grips there, like, you know, Phil Murphy and his crew. We got like this, I've never had it before, where a grip has given me unlimited crane use. So it was basically just, you know, I could have like 3 cranes out if I wanted to. It wouldn't be an extra cost. And, you know, you don't want to take the piss or anything. You know, you don't want to like just have it, because you can burn out the crew and everything. But yeah, it was just a really, so that department was really cool. And then, yeah, so there was just, I brought in my first AD who I'd worked with in previous movie, and he hired his local team, and yeah, it was, but outside of that, it was all, you know, my DP was from America, but everyone else was from Southern Ireland.
Awesome. And so another one of the culture shocks for me was, you know, coming from Australia, we don't have a lot of money, so we all muck in. We all, you know, if we're losing light, you pick up a prop and, you know, move it if you have to and help carry a sandbag. But I found that was not the case in America, Schuyler. So can you talk to us about some experiences in that regard?
Yeah, I mean, again, just coming back to the way the unions work in the United States, it really kind of balkanizes the crew, and that kind of cuts against that collaborative spirit I think that Australian crews have, where if you know, we're about to shoot and we decide that this table is all wrong, you might find anyone from a PA to the director, him or herself, coming and going like, let's just move it over. But that just doesn't happen in the US because that's somebody's union prescribed job. And I think, you know, that's a learning curve and not necessarily a fun one. And I think even someone like Baz found that frustrating because he's a very energetic, tactile, hands-on person who knows where he wants the fucking lamp. And so that, you know, that can be counterproductive. But I will say it's not all about just dumping on IATSE and how they've somehow ruined movie making, because I think that there's a bigger problem in the United States, which is that indie films, of which I've made, you know, half a dozen smaller budgeted films that fall below the threshold where you need a unionized crew, can turn into a total free-for-all. And you're fighting an uphill battle to maintain a safe and healthy work environment without any guardrails. And so on the one hand, you have, you know, studio movies where you can't even, you know, move the water glass. On the other hand, you have things that lead to sometimes terrible and fatal accidents on set. And so I think, you know, something that in Europe, in the UK, in Australia, trying to create a more uniform, reasonable approach to a unionized workplace on set that can apply broadly to films big and small, but allow that kind of collaboration, and you don't have to go and get everyone to sign their name before they start their own car.
Yeah, that's a great point. So, you know, I discussed with Julius the idea of integrating, your favourites with locals, and Sammy, you had some interesting experiences in Morocco where you needed what you described a local.
Local. Yeah, I was saying how important hiring local is, and how that communication flows very well when you hire a local crew, because they all know each other inevitably.
Absolutely.
And they know. For instance, in the AD department, they'll also probably know the extras. They'll know the local cast and whatever. Anyway, but my story was, we were shooting in Morocco, and we had Penelope Cruz, and she was dating Tom Cruise. And he had obviously... he's not in that film, but he's in others. He insisted on her having his security that he'd obviously used in Marrakesh. But a Marrakesh driver is not a desert driver. So we had a situation where Penelope was notoriously late. And so my job was to go and make sure she got in the car that morning for a very important dawn shot. So I woke her up at 2:30 or whatever it was. And she was in the vehicle behind, and I was in the lead vehicle. And off we go. And it was Nokia's. So I was like... to the sat phone. We're on our way, and then, driving off in the dark, and then suddenly, and there's no car behind us. And I was trying to speak in my schoolgirl French to my driver, where is Penelope? And he's like, it's okay. And I rang the AD at base, and I said, it's apparently okay. She's going to be at base, but she's not with me. And... arrive in base camp, and there's the AD going, not here. And so we turn around and head out to the desert, and in the distance, heading towards the Mazuga Dunes, was the hazard lights. And I'm like, don't, stop. And so we, get to the car, the sun's up, lost the shot, whatever. But they did shoot it with the double, and it is in the movie. And anyway, I run to the thing and I knock on the window. Penelope's fast asleep in the back of the car. Had no clue what had just gone on. And the only thing she said is, please tell them I didn't sleep in. Please tell them I didn't sleep in. So my point being that, for that, the desert drivers know 2 rocks means turn right, 1 rock means turn left. So there's local, and then there's local. And you need to trust where you are, that they know what they're talking about. So when the service company, whoever it is that you're teaming with, say, this is important, whether Tom Cruise says it or not, it's important.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a cracking story.
When a line producer in Winnipeg, Canada, tells you that we shouldn't schedule shooting days when the Jets, the local ice hockey team, are playing, listen, because you'll find the entire crew standing back at base with a projector and a giant screen watching ice hockey, while the American director and DP are sitting in the location by themselves, wondering where the fuck everybody is. Different places have different local eccentricities, and you have to talk to the locals.
Yeah,
and
some crew won't work if Bob is on working on the show.
Yeah, that's right.
They're like, no, it doesn't matter how much money you throw him. I'm not working with Bob.
Not working with that guy. Yeah. And then it's like, what's wrong with that guy? No one will tell you, but it's,
Yeah, so a local line producer can know that already and inform you. Yeah.
That's great. And so I had an interesting experience in the UK. I loved my crew, and they were very funny, and we had a great time mostly. But it was my first experience of French hours. And I was told that the crew was going to be more efficient. Obviously I've got a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, so there definitely appeals to me in shooting 10 hours. But once I got into sort of week 3, I discovered 2 things. One, I really missed a regroup moment, and 2, we weren't supposed to take a lunch break, and inevitably every day there was a lunch break taken, which on a compressed schedule like ours was extremely challenging. How did you find it, for instance?
Yeah, so we didn't do continuous hours in Ireland, but I did it on Overlord in London, and it was very. I'd shot my movie in Australia, my first feature, Son of a Gun, and so I had and we did 12-hour days. I or 10-hour days. I can't remember, but there was a lunch break. And so I wasn't used to the continuous hours, and I didn't know the limitations of it, and I didn't know the pros and the cons of it. But what I did find out was that they took a lunch break anyway, which was kind of bizarre, because usually a turnaround for me, especially if you've got a DP who's quick, and I hire quick DPs, it's usually no more than 20 minutes. And so the turnaround was like, why is it taking 45 minutes? And it was basically they were just baking in a lunch. And so that was, I try to get ahead of that by, doing some, getting casts in early and doing, just to block the scenes so we're ready on the dot. And still, the mornings were very slow. It just took forever for things to get going. I'm used to like shooting, 20 minutes after call, and yeah, it was always like an hour and a half. And they had this saying that you're shooting Ben-Hur in the morning, and by the afternoon you're shooting Neighbours, because you're just running around like crazy trying to get all the shots, for your day, make your day. But yeah, but the thing is, you can't fight the system, so you got to just know the pros and cons. You got to ask questions. You got to go, okay, knowing these things, that's how it is. So you might go, if you're depending on your budget, go to the studio. 45 days ain't enough. We're shooting in London, we need 50 because of all these things. So just be aware of when they're asking those questions, and also asking the crew to do overtime when they're doing continuous days. They don't like it because they're not taking a lunch break, right? So you got to be very careful of even if you've got a line producer or a producer saying, no worry, we've got like 6 hours a week overtime baked in. It doesn't matter. You've got to negotiate it. You have to be and in London, you have to go around and ask all the heads of the department if they are okay with it. And it's very political. And also the thing that they have is grace. Do you want to explain grace?
So, I mean, number one, I don't know if we've got any English producers in the audience, but I also found the London slow start, which was interesting. Anyone got any insight on that? Nope, no worries. And, in America in particular, if you are going to go into OT, they'll give you sort of 10, 15 minutes. Whereas I said before, in London, it's 30 seconds and you're dead.
Yeah.
And you have to go and talk to all of the heads of department, all of the crew, and make sure that they'll give you the grace.
Yep.
And if you ask for it too many times, I mean, they will absolutely crucify you. And rightly so. I mean, gets to a point where you're taking the piss.
I won't mention the production or the DP or the gaffer, but I've watched a full-on fight between the gaffer and the DP over going into Grace for a shot, and this was like 10 minutes. And he just said, stuff it, we can get it, let's just get it. And we were like, yeah, let's just go. And we had 5 minutes left. Gaffer turned the house lights on, which is even worse than turning the lights off, because
wow.
Anyway, and we all had beers that weekend. It was fine, we were, at the moment we were all like at each other, but we got the shots in the movie, and how those 5 minutes, as everyone knows on set, that 5 minutes feels like an hour. You can get so much done at the end of the day, and you feel like, that getting taken away from you, it was like, it was real...
Heartbreaking.
It was heartbreaking, yeah.
And Schuyler, you've been doing it in Australia, right? Well, you and Sammy together. How have you found it?
Sammy and I did a TR movie that we just recently produced that's in post-production right now, based on the Paul Kelly song, How to Make Gravy, and we did continuous hours, and found generally that the crew are getting more used to it because it's been brought in with international productions. I mean, when we did it on Elvis, in a large part that was motivated by Hanks's prosthetics. And So once we had Tom Hanks in that rig, you don't want to then say like, and now we're just going to make him sit around for, for an hour for lunch. And people, even though it's Tom Hanks, he's a human being, and the crew are generally sympathetic to that, and it motivated us to get through a continuous day. But then I think if that's the first time that you've done it, you find that there's something nice about going home after 10 hours, and you do have to manage that sort of creeping break. People have to eat, and you're supposed to just eat when time permits, and it might be different. It's over a window. It might be different for different departments. And so it does require quite a bit of behind-the-scenes management, particularly by the AD department. But I found, that was my first real experience of it on Elvis, and found it to be really helpful. And so Sammy and I talked about it for Gravy, which was a smaller film and didn't have any obvious reason, like we had to do it because of this, that, and that factor. But do you want to talk about it?
Yeah, the only thing that we don't have Grace here either anymore on a local show, which is difficult because we had a very tight budget, and so 5-6 minutes of overtime is a big deal. Whereas the American shows get Grace, so that's something that we have. We talk a lot about because and I'm saying the American shows here get 18 minutes grace, but the Australian shows here get no grace.
Yeah, so
that doesn't feel fair.
Yeah, that's a good question. That's the questions that a director or producer needs to ask. Because that's a massive deal. Like that difference and not knowing that. It's all about just asking those questions because they're huge.
Yeah.
But it is worth acknowledging that we do have sort of two systems now concurrently, and it's not necessarily sensible, logical, or fair. And I know it's something that SPA is involved in an ongoing conversation with Mia about, but I think it's really important that we acknowledge that we have the same crews working for big US productions who with their collective muscle kind of have Mia over a barrel on what they're willing to get those crews to do, and for independent and local productions don't necessarily have that same clout, and it is harder. And what producers and productions can get out of the crew in terms of grace and hours is much more favorably weighted to Hollywood productions shooting in Australia right now than to what Australian producers can make, and then the deal that they have with Mia, which kind of defies logic in my opinion.
Yeah, and so, Schuyler, as an independent producer here in Australia, we had a discussion the other day about, that there's some things that we can actually learn from the Americans in terms of how we get our productions going and how they can work, and things that, potentially we could explore with, the government and Screen Australia and the various funding bodies. Did you want to talk about that?
Sure. I mean, not to sort of grab the wheel from the conversation that we're having about the way sets function and crews and just the broader filmmaking culture, but widening the lens to talking about how films actually get made. I mean, I went from Australia to the US over 15 years ago to produce and with a focus on making independent film, and nothing prepared me for how challenging it would be to have to really raise every dollar without any kind of safety net and without any kind of incentive and support. But it makes you very resourceful, it makes you very enterprising. And I found that in the sort of vibrant New York indie film world, there is a culture of private equity and of raising that money and cultivating donors and trying to create, not donors, investors, and trying to create investor relationships that can carry over from one picture to another. And come back to Australia, and I feel like we have the enormous fortune of these hard-won support from federal, state, and even in the Gold Coast local screen agencies. But I would love to think that we could take on board some of that entrepreneurial spirit of American independent producers and stand on the shoulders of what we already have. And in my limited experience here, I have found that there is interest. There is a private investor interest in film, but it hasn't been developed. And I think there was a time in Australia where there were various incentives for people to invest in movies. Those things tended to fall apart because of systemic abuse, and this is sort of ancient history now. And what we have with the screen agencies is, we're unbelievably fortunate to have that kind of support. But it would be great to marry that with a slightly with that sort of indie spirit that American producers are able to bring to find wealthy individuals who love movies and are excited by those opportunities, part them with their money, and a great experience for everybody ensues.
Yeah, because it's tax incentives, right, in America, which...
Yeah, there are sections of the US tax code that make it favorable for a high net worth individual to invest in movies, which is, again, something that used to exist in Australia. That system, I think, collapsed under systemic abuse, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's not something that could benefit. We have, yes, that system went away, but it saw a massive decline in any kind of private investment in the screen industry, and not all of it was bad. So, I mean, that's just for conversation.
So I have a couple of questions that have come in from Umi Karenga Hewitt. I'm definitely butchered that name. Did I? Sweet. Umi? Yes. All right. Umi, what kind of systems and processes do you use to help keep your options open when you inevitably need to adapt during development and production? Anyone have any thoughts on that?
Say it one more time.
So what kind of systems and processes...
Is your go. Oh, thank you. Someone else is talking about having a go-to person that is the problem fixer, and they just, not a runner, but just someone. So, is there a thing that when you've worked on films or shows that you use to do that adapting?
I think that's leaning on your service company. So, for instance, when you go to Morocco, there's a service company that you. So, just making sure that you're communicating with them. And they're communicating with you about what happens in their countries, really. And I don't think that there's a cheat sheet, because it's sort of, everything is, it's too, there are cheat sheets, but I think that it's probably just being able to have someone that you can say, how does it work here? And I'm always like, ask as many questions, as you've said, as possible, and don't feel stupid, and just ask, because there will be quirks that you'd have no idea about.
You don't have like a binder that's like...
I have plenty of binders, but nothing that I could email you.
But I think some of the things that will arise will be local and cultural specific, and that Sammy's absolutely right. Having that, tapping into and making the most of that local knowledge is important. But some of them are just the vicissitudes of making movies. It's hard and unpredictable. And I've been really fortunate to make movies consistently with a group of people, whether that was over successive indie films in the US or working with Baz and the people with whom he and Catherine surround themselves. But I think there's a balance between the people that you're working with on that movie in that time in that place, and trying to maintain a group of people where you're building a rapport over multiple films, and that sort of very quick problem solving that I think you might be alluding to can often come on your third movie, when you have all of that shared experience and you've been through so many different things that you're able to very quickly get to the bottom of what's going on and adapt, and you just have that shorthand and that trust with people.
And to Julius's point earlier, like a great line producer and a great AD who knows the local market.
Yeah, absolutely. Hiring someone local who just knows the lay of the land and knows the kind of the granular, the minutiae of it is so valuable. And then and the pivoting, and being fluid, and not, because you can't plan for these things. You can't plan, you might have known that there was, for instance, it was forecasted for rain that day, but you didn't know at what the sound. Yeah. It wasn't like, that's unpredictable, and you didn't know until it happened. And it's just like, those are the things that you need to yeah, just be able to like have a great crew and behind you that you can pivot really quickly. And unfortunately, you know, there are some rules that, you know, we're prohibiting you. You just, so no, it's a very, it's something you can't particularly have a book for, you know.
Well, on that note, hopefully we've saved some of you from some of the pitfalls that we've faced. And I'd like to thank my esteemed panels, Schuyler, Sammy, and Julius. Thank you very much, guys.